Chapter 15. Third Persecution. Saint Simeon. After the death of the Emperor Domitian, the Senate repealed all his wicked laws, and so the general persecution of the Christians came to an end. Still, however, they were so much hated by the pagans that they continued to be persecuted in places where there were so many of them as to attract the attention of their enemies, and in less than 10 years, another great persecution broke out. The Emperor Trajan was now on the throne. Though he was a pagan, yet he was such a kind prince and was so much beloved that for many hundred years after his death, it was the custom of the Romans to wish that each new emperor might be happier than Augustus and better than Trajan. But though he was so humane in other respects, yet he was an enemy to the Christians, and, strange to say, he thought it his duty to persecute them. He had a friend, a very clever man, called Pliny, whom he appointed governor of Bithynia and Pontus. When Pliny arrived in the countries he was to govern, he found himself rather at a loss to know how to treat the Christians who were brought before his tribunal, and he wrote to the emperor to ask what he was to do with them. His letter and Trajan's answer are very interesting, because they show what good and clever pagans thought about the Christians. Pliny did not at once believe everything that people said against them, but he took a great deal of trouble to find out the real truth about them. He did not trust to common reports, but he made inquiry of persons who had formerly been Christians, but had become apostates, and he also put to the torture 2 female slaves, who then filled the office of deaconesses in the church, in hopes that they would be forced by the pain to tell him all they knew. He wrote to Trajan that he could discover no crime against the Christians, and that all that he had learned about them was that they were in the habit of assembling one day in the week, before daybreak, to pray and sing hymns in honour of one Christ, whom they adored as God, that they bound themselves by an oath not to commit any crime, neither to steal, nor to murder, nor to cheat, nor to break their promise, that they afterwards assembled to eat a simple and innocent meal, and that in all things they acted according to the laws. Pliny was a just and humane man, and it seemed to him, on the one hand, very hard to punish such persons as these, but, on the other hand, everyone seemed to think that they were dangerous people, and other governors were in the habit of putting them to death. And besides, their religion had spread so widely that in many places the temples of the heathen gods were quite deserted, and it seemed as if the pagan religion would soon be forgotten. So he wrote to Trajan to inquire what he was to do, whether he was to punish them or not, and if he was to punish them, whether any difference was to be made between young children and grown persons, whether those who gave up their religion and offered sacrifice to the gods were to be pardoned, and whether they were to be punished simply for being Christians, or only if they were found guilty of some other crime. Now, it seems to us there was only one answer to be given to this letter, which was that persons who committed no crime against the laws ought not to be punished, but Trajan judged otherwise. He ordered that no search was to be made for Christians, but that whenever they happened to be brought before the tribunals, they were to be punished simply for being Christians, without being found guilty of any other crime, while those who gave up their religion were to be pardoned. Trajan did not decide in this way because he was an irreligious man, or because he was bigoted to one form of religion above all others, but because he thought it his duty, as a good governor, to put down the Christians. As the Roman Empire was made up of a great many countries which the Romans had conquered, and each country had its own religion, so it came to pass that there were a great many different religions in the Roman Empire. Every person was allowed to worship what God he liked, and to follow what religion he liked best, but no one thought of saying that his own God or his own religion was the only true one, because the Roman laws said that all the religions were equally true, and all gods equally to be worshipped, provided they were licensed by the state. The Christians, however, knew how very foolish it was to talk in this way, since there can be only one true religion, and all other religions which are different from it must be false, and so they always said that the Christian religion was the only true one, and that those of the pagans were false. The pagans would not have cared if the Christians had simply believed Jesus to be God, but they were very angry when they were told that he was the only true God, and that all their own gods and all their own religions were false. And so the followers of all the different pagan religions, who agreed in nothing else, agreed in at least one thing, which was to hate and persecute the Christians, just as nowadays Protestants of all sects agree in hating Catholics for saying that the Catholic Church is the only true church, and that there is no salvation outside of it. Trajan felt like the other pagans, and he did not choose that anyone should blame all the different religions which the state sanctioned. He gave orders to punish the Christians, even when they had done nothing else against the laws. Several very good bishops suffered at this time. One of them was St. Simeon, the brother of St. James the Less, who had been appointed Bishop of Jerusalem after the death of St. James, and had governed that church ever since. He was 120 years of age when he was taken before Atticus, the proconsul, and was accused of being a Christian and of belonging to the family of David, from which the great Messiah was to be born. Atticus talked a long time to the old man, trying to persuade him to give up his religion and to save his life by obeying the emperor and sacrificing to the gods. But Saint Simeon had known and loved Jesus too long to think of such a thing. As he belonged to the family of St. Joseph, he must have known our Lord from the time of his birth, even during those 30 years which he had spent at Nazareth, when so few other people knew him. He had loved him and had followed him on earth for a long life of above 100 years, and he would not deny him now, when he was so old that he must soon be called to see him in heaven. Instead of caring for what Atticus said to him, he thought only of the honour and happiness of suffering for Jesus, and of the glorious martyr's crown which he should gain. So he refused to sacrifice to the gods, and begged Atticus to lose no time in putting him to death. He was then scourged and put on the rack and tortured in several other ways, while at the same time the executioners took great care not to kill him, wishing him to live the longer in order that they might torture him the more. Day after day he was brought out to be scourged and racked and tortured, and day after day, just when he seemed to be on the point of dying and escaping out of their hands, the tortures were stopped, and he was sent back into prison to recover his strength a little and be able to stand another day's torturing. He bore it all with such extraordinary patience that even the hard-hearted Atticus wondered how such a feeble old man could stand out against such sharp and lingering torments. At last, Atticus was wearied out with what he called the obstinacy of the old man, and he ordered him to be crucified. The sentence was executed on the 18th of February, AD 117, on which day the Church keeps the feast of St. Simeon.